Hi, I just wanted to share this presentation that I will be presenting to our UAF team tomorrow. We are competing in an international Department of Energy challenge for zero carbon residential design. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be residential, but that is what the team has decided. So that required me to sign up for a class again, so that would be under the Sustainable Energy Program with Mark Nisteller at UAF Bristol Bay campus. So they had asked me to come up with a presentation, and I thought that it was really cool with the content I will be presenting, and I wanted to share with the tribe. So the village of Solomon, as we know, sits on the Seward Peninsula. Here is a Google Earth image of Solomon and what it looks like from above. Really small, not many structures out there. And we became a federally recognized tribal entity under the Indian Reorganization Act of 1993. So we are a displaced community that was forced out of our village site due to the shutdown of the BIA schoolhouse in 1956. Our last inhabitant relocated in 2004. We have approximately 161 tribally enrolled tribal members. We like to feel united and gather as much as possible. As most of us live outside of the region, we're widespread throughout Alaska and the lower 48. We are governed by a 7-member traditional council. We heavily rely on grant funding as a small and needy tribe. And we host an annual Francis Wright Youth and Elder Camp for 5 days in Solomon at our old BIA schoolhouse each August, funded slowly on grants to fly in our members outside of Nome. Our mission is to increase cultural awareness and promote the well-being of our tribal members while protecting our environment. This is a screenshot from our website. Its primary purpose is to design and implement programs to increase the quality of life and well-being of the tribe, and as a Bering Strait regional member village to contribute to our surrounding communities for strengthening and enhancing safety, cultural, environmental, social, and economic future. In the years following the storm in 1913, Solomon changed from an all-Caucasian mining town to a predominantly Inupiat village. The people relied on subsistence and reindeer herding for their livelihood. In 1918, the flu epidemic struck Solomon, and over half of the 62 residents died of the influenza and were buried in a mass grave. In 1939, the community relocated to the present site, which was formerly known as Jerusalem Hill. The BIA constructed a large school in 1940, and we have, reconstructed it into our community center from an EDA grant. So during World War II, a number of families moved away from Solomon when the school shut down in 1956, requiring all families with children to move to communities with schools, many of whom went to Nome and Anchorage. Solomon continued its mail license until 1958, when there were too few residents to support the mail contract. The Solomon Roadhouse operated until the 1970s and served as the last checkpoint for the Iditarod, the last greatest race on Earth during its several years. The Safety Roadhouse now serves as the last checkpoint before Nome. And a photo on the left would be Pete Kern Sr. with his wife Pauline standing in front of the general store when it was in operation. And the photo on the right is what we know of the general store today. And then the photo in the middle is unknown Solomon residents. The world-renowned last train to nowhere. Nome Council Road turns inland at the ghost town of Solomon, an old mining town with an abandoned railroad train known locally as the last train to nowhere. And what we see today would be the remains of the Council City and Solomon River Railroad. The engines were originally used on the New York City elevated lines in 1881, then were shipped to Alaska in 1903 to serve the miners along this line to Nome. A gold strike at Ophir was the inspiration for the construction of the railroad, but a huge storm in 1913 took out the tracks and stranded the rolling stock where it is today, literally dissolving under the influence of Bering Sea storms. And we all know this is a very scenic spot for bird watching. And we're all very aware of this as well, the information that is posted up by the trains so that tourists can read all about Solomon. And this is a photo of when this was considered the new schoolhouse, which was built in 1940 by the BIA. And if you really think about it, it really has transformed from one small little tiny school, which was so new and fresh and nice for them back then, to what we have now today. This is a photo of some of the schoolhouse children, and I wish I had captions of every student in this photo, but I do not. But I think it's a really cool photo that I wanted to share. So this is the photo of our reconstructed BIA schoolhouse, funded by the NSEDC OEF grant and then the State of Alaska EDA grant. And then this is what it is today after the solar install. So it seems as though our schoolhouse has transformed and continues to do so. The Village of Solomon Local Economic Development Plan, which we do update every 5 years, which this is a snapshot of the first and second page of the LEDP, and in my presentation I will go into further detail about what that is. And a snapshot of our renewable energy plan with our project timeline. And I will go into more detail about how we as a tribe got together and decided on strategizing our renewable and alternative energy efforts. And then, of course, this is our future with Solomon's microgrid visual, with the wind turbines, the solar panels. I created this image a couple years ago. And if you can see, I drew on solar panels on the B&B. And what do we have today? It's amazing how far we have come as a tribe in the projects that we have accomplished. This is the draft of our affordable housing plan, which the council has been diligently working on. And part of my presentation is to explain who we are, our history, what we want as a tribe, where we really see ourselves in the future, and the need for housing as we are designing a zero carbon residential home. Part of that is we need to establish why we need housing plans. So we already know that the housing is so scarce, and so I wanted to give them a snapshot of our affordable housing program plan, which highlights in these graphs the scarcity of dwellings within Nome and above all the region. On top of that, part of our housing need is to mitigate the COVID-19 virus as much as possible. Overcrowding is a very, very real issue for us in Nome, and if we had more housing so that we can adequately and appropriately quarantine and isolate, then we would be able to mitigate or at least get a better handle on the COVID-19 cases. This is a snapshot of the November 11, 2021 Nome Nugget, and it's on the front page. COVID-19 cases rise to 236 in the region. So I will go into detail about that issue as part of our need for housing. And the U.S. Department of Energy Solar Decathlon 2022 Design Challenge is what I am involved with as far as the UAF team goes. And the purpose is to design and build high-performance buildings that mitigate climate change and improve our quality of life, which goes absolutely in line with what we have been trying to achieve. And on the right is a snapshot of Resolution 2019-02, a resolution supporting the purpose of the Paris Agreement of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and adopting the goals of the agreement. And this is why the team is interested in basically working on designing something specifically for Solomon. Part of me having this presentation tomorrow in class is to support why we are doing it. The local energy, clean energy sources in Nome currently would be the wind turbines up at Anvil, and if you look on the right, the graph shows the blue line, which is the wind energy being produced. The top line would be the fuel oil. And if you look on the left, the Alaska Center for Energy and Power is working on a project to integrate geothermal with the wind currently. So right now, the clean local energy options would really just be the wind that we have. And a snapshot of what you all pay for electricity at Nome Joint, 37.75 cents an hour per kilowatt. And then if you look at the top left, that is a screenshot of the weather today, -6 degrees. So when you design a home, you must put in to factor the climate, the weather, you know, what the house would be able to withstand as far as comfortability, insulation, and energy efficiency. And then on the bottom left is a snapshot of my former professor, Tom Marsick's house that he built, which was established as the world's tightest house that he built in Dillingham, which is almost zero carbon, almost, but not quite. And it's really an achievement for him to build such a high-performing home. And ultimately, having the opportunity to design zero-carbon homes, as the Village of Solomon has the capability to rebuild their village as well as build residential dwellings in Nome, falls in line with the big picture for the future of the well-being and infrastructure of the tribe's priorities. And these plans can serve as the framework moving forward as the tribe accomplishes such priorities. These are my references. And that was my presentation.